Hello and welcome to this lesson. We're going to continue on the topic of probability today. So probability means the chance of something happening. And the chance of something happening can be thought of as lying along a scale from impossible to certain. And the values, or the numerical values that we tend to put with this, are 0 being impossible and certain being 1. And all the values that go between 0 and 1 can take obviously the form of being a fraction, a decimal or a percentage. And we're going to be writing our probabilities as fractions, decimals and percentages today. So what is the probability or chance of something? How do we write it? Well, we tend to write it, as I say, as a fraction initially, and then we think about a percentage or a decimal. So that fraction is the event out of all possible outcomes. So let's have a look at the event of a coin landing on heads when you toss it. Well, there is one way that it can land on heads, and there are two possible outcomes, or two possible ways that it can land, on heads or on tails. So we say that this is 1 out of 2. And we can write this as a decimal, 0.5, and as a percentage, 50%. Here, the event of getting a 6 on a dice, well, there's one way that you can get a 6, but there are 6 possible ways that that dice can land. So we would write this as 1 out of 6. Now I'll do a little reminder shortly of how we convert those into decimals and percentages when they are fractions that are not as friendly to convert into those, but I will go through that shortly. Here, the event is getting a P on the spinner. Well, there is one way that you can get a P on the spinner out of a possible 5 ways. So we say this is a fraction 1 out of 5. So let's have a little look about how we can write these as decimals and percentages. So let's have a look at this spinner. It says, what is the probability of spinning blue? Well, in terms of a word, 1 out of 4, well, that's going to be unlikely. The fraction, there's one way that it can land as blue out of a possible 4. How do we get 1/4 to be a decimal? Well, you have to think about making it into an equivalent fraction over 100, which will also give us the percentage. How many 4s in 100? Well, you can think about it as the other way around, 100 divided by 4. So I've multiplied that by 25. So whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. So 1 multiplied by 25 is 25, which gives me a decimal 0.25. And my percentage is 25%. What is the probability of picking a yellow bead from this bag? Well, I'd say it is quite likely in terms of a word. As a fraction, there are 7 yellow beads out of a total of 10. So 7 over 10. What's that as a decimal? Well, think about your place value table. That's 7/10. So it's going to be a 7 in the tenths column. But you can also think about it as a fraction out of 100. And I've multiplied that by 10. So I must do the same to the top, and I get 7t on the top, which is 0.70. Or you can just leave it as 0.7. Either way, it's a 7 in the tenths column. And that gives me a percentage straight away, because whatever is on the numerator when the denominator is 100, that gives you your percentage. 70%. What is the probability of picking a square number? Well, your square numbers, remember, are the result of multiplying the same number by itself twice. So 1 times 1 is a square number. And 2 times 2 is 4, which gives me a square number. Let's just do one more. Let's just see. So 3 times 3 is 9. 9 is your square number. So the only square numbers I have here are 1 and 4. So yeah, it's not an exact science, but I'd say that this is unlikely that we get a square number, but I know it's just under half. What about as a fraction? Well, there are two possible ways you can get a square number out of a possible 5. How do I get this as a decimal and percentage? Well, think about your equivalent fraction over 100. How many 5s in 100? 20. So I've multiplied that by 20. Do the same to the top. 2 lots of 20 gives me 40. So I get my decimal as 0.40, or just 0.4, and my percentage as 40%. And finally, what is the probability of spinning blue on this spinner? Well, again, I know it's only just under half, but we can use the word unlikely. And it is 1 out of a possible 3 ways. How do we get this as a decimal? 1 divided by 3. Well, 3 is not a factor of 100, so I can't do it this way. I can't do my equivalent fraction method because 3 is not a factor of 100, so I can't do that. I have to do a bus stop. So I'm going to do a bus stop, and it's not what you expect. It's 3's into 1, okay? Because remember, this is 1 divided by 3, so that's how many 3's there are in 1. That might seem strange, but that is what it is. So 3's into 1 don't go. Carry 1. 3's into 10, go 3 times. Remainder 1, and this is going to keep going. Okay, so 0.3 recurring. And to write that, 0.3 recurring, you can either write it like this, 3, 3, 3, 3 like this, and put a few dots after it like that. You can do that, or you can do it in a really sophisticated way, and you can put a dot on the top of the 3, like that. And as a percentage, this is 33.3 recurring percent. Make sure you put the dot above the 3, like that.